Hi, and welcome to episode 6 of How to Do Digital Marketing, where we help people learn and apply expert techniques which they can apply in their work or in their business or simply to enhance the skill. For more information and tips, guides, and resources, please visit www.howtododigitalmarketing.com. This is your one stop source for everything that you wanted to learn from beginners to an expert advice on the entire gamut of digital marketing. Episode 6 onwards, we are going to cover a very important topic, which is a fulcrum of what you do on the digital internet, which is to do with website development. The key highlights that we are going to be talking about in this session is looking at what is the blueprint of a website, and we will touch upon a few basics of web development tools and technologies that you as a user needs to understand, and because you would be using them or you'll be interacting with people who are going to be using them. And this session will essentially set an overview for the next few episodes where we will get into depth in each of these areas that we're going to talk about in this session. The process of website development is essentially an outline that you need to create a website. Most people, when they say that we want to create a website, they simply jump into looking at how should the website look, what kind of color should we have, what kind of images that you have. Now, that is a wrong way to develop a website. You need to follow a certain process, because when you follow a certain process, you save on time, you save on effort, and you save on money. And in this session, we'll look at what is the process that one needs to follow. Plus, we'll also look at a few tools and software that will help you manage this process more effectively, and so that you can avoid lengthy feedback cycles. The starting point of any development process, and not just website development, this holds true for any project, is the preparatory phase, where you essentially start scoping out what is it that you require. And if you're working for somebody in terms of developing a site, or whether you're working for your boss who's asked you to develop a website, you need to set very clear expectations of what is expected out of you, what is expected out of the project, and what is the end delivery output that is required. And managing the expectations, there are some tools that you could use to actually project manage the entire process, because you will have multiple stakeholders in a website development process. You would have people in programming, you might have people in content, you will definitely have people in design, and you might even have your IT manager responsible as part of the web development process. So a project management tool can actually help you manage all the different stakeholders in this entire gamut. There are 3 good tools that we would recommend. The top tool is Asana. It's very easy to use. There's Trello and there's Basecamp. My favorite is, of course, Asana and Basecamp. Both of them are extremely great tools to use. Trello is also not too bad. You could use any of these tools to actually project manage your entire web development project. And all of these tools also come with a free trial, so that will be a great opportunity for you actually use it and actually learn from it. Now let's get started on a design project. Now, what are the various phases that you would need to go through? There are essentially 7 different phases that a website needs to go through in terms of a development. And let's quickly look at what are these various phases. Phase 1 is essentially defining this goal or the objective of why are you building a website. Like I mentioned before, don't straight away jump into what kind of features should you have. Should it have this feature? Should it have that functionality? Should it look like this? Should it look like that? That's not the process that you need to follow. The first and most important thing you need to follow is list your objective and goals. What is a website supposed to be doing? Please remember, your website is the face of your company or the face of your brand on the internet. So therefore, you need to spend a lot of time defining this goal. And this will also help you define the schedule, the budget, the timeline, the technical need, visual style, and the content structure for the target audience. Phase 2 is once you defined the goal in terms of what the website is, you need to define who is the primary audience who you want visiting your website. Is it a B2C, which is business to consumer, or expecting customers or end consumers to come and visit your website? Or are you looking at business to business, which means that you're going to be selling to other businesses? Because depending on who is going to be coming, your imagery and your content will need to be defined basis the people who are going to come. For instance, if I were to selling Nike shoes to consumers, I would have a different imagery as opposed to if I wanted to sell shoes or Nike shoes to people in, let's say, sports organizations or sports dealers. Because in the first case, I'm selling to consumers, so I will need to talk and in terms of visual appeal, in terms of what they can do with the shoes that I am making. But in the second instance, when I'm selling to business, it is more professional. I have to give them business reasons why they need to buy from me as opposed to buying from a competitor. So broadly, you need to very clearly put a balance as to who are you targeting. Because once you define who your target is, everything else will flow from that, both in terms of color, the tonality, the style, the imagery, the content. And in subsequent episodes, we will definitely get into depth of each of these things to give you a better handle as to how you can create the best outstanding website for your customers. The phase 3 is to develop the content architecture around what your business objectives were and around who your customers or likely website visitors are going to be. So in content architecture, there are 3 aspects of it. The first is you need to define what the content requirement is, which is based on who or what is it that you're going to be talking about on your site. And basis that, you need to do the mapping of the content. What kind of materials would you use? Would it be a video based content? Would it be textual based content? Would it be graphical based content? How much of this content do you have? How much content would you need to write again? How much content can you write yourself? How much content will you need an external freelance content writer to write for you? Now, these are all aspects of what defines the content mapping and the architecture of what your site is. And basis this, you will then look at the layout of the site, because you have now a handle of what you want to talk about. Please remember, in digital marketing, everything is about communication. So you need to communicate what your brand's objectives are and what your brand's promise is to customers. So whether they're B2C or whether they're B2B. So the brand promise, the company promise needs to come out in the content that you're going to put up on your website. Once the content is created from your site, ask yourself 3 questions. Is all the content correct or accurate? Do you have anything missing? And most importantly, and this is very critical from the perspective of SEO that we will study as we go along into the session, is it useful to your readers? If it is not useful for your readers, then I would suggest you need to go back to the drawing board and rewrite and redraw the entire content. Please remember, a lot of mistakes which a lot of people tend to do is write content from a manufacturer's perspective, in terms of saying that my product is this, my brand is this. But it's a much better approach would be to look at the content from the customer's perspective. What is the customer looking for? And address your content in terms of delivering to him what he's already searching for. And therefore, the promise, the messaging, and the tonality and style will need to be dependent on what the customer is focused on. Phase 4 is in terms of once you've got defined what your content is, you then need to create a site structure or site architecture, which is the backbone or the reference guide of the website. And this gives you a complete overview of the website. So there's a sitemap, which is crucial for understanding the content organization. A sitemap is also helpful in terms of when you're publishing it on WordPress or in your site. Google looks at the sitemap and therefore understands how the content is organized and the hierarchy of the content. Uh, an important aspect of the web development process is the wireframe. A wireframe is nothing but a simple architecture of what the site will look like. A good corollary, a good example of a wireframe is an house architecture. You've seen architects who draw up plans for a house. They're saying that this is where the window is going to be, this is where the door is going to be, this is how the roof is going to be. So a wireframe is similar layout of the fundamental elements of a web interface. It is not a design, it is not a layout, but it's an architecture. And using this architecture, the benefit of using a wireframe is that you have all your other intermediary stakeholders who are responsible for developing the project, such as your programmers or your content writer or your visual designer. They can all work on the same wireframe and work parallelly. So the benefit is that they don't have to depend on each other to work at the same time. So they can work parallelly, and it will actually shorten down your entire web development cycle. We'll get into depth in subsequent episodes of what the wireframe actually does. We will use an example of Balsamiq to actually take you through a wireframing process so that you will get a better handle of how to use a wireframe for your website. The next phase is the UI or the UX, and this is where the fun and the interesting stuff really happens in terms of how should your site look, how should your site interact with customers. Remember, UI stands for user interface and UX stands for user experience. So what is the kind of experience your site will give to the customers, and what is the kind of interface that you'll have with the customer. So this is where both the designer and the programmer works together to implement a proper design elements. So what should be the color be of the button? Where should the button be placed? Should be on the top right, should be on the top bottom, it should be big, small. These are all UI UX dependent features which the programmer and the designer or the UI UX person works together along with the graphics person. So that's phase 5. Phase 6 is when you actually get into development, which is the programming work. So as you can see, phase 1 to phase 5, you really haven't started work on the actual programming of the website. Now this is where you get into the actually programming. And what is programming? They are essentially languages which help people to which computers to communicate with the net and tell them what to do. There are a lot of programming languages. So some of these very popular languages, just for your understanding, JavaScript is one programming language which is used by all web browsers. There's CoffeeScript, there's Go, there's Swift, there's Java, Python, Ruby, PHP. PHP is one of very popular programming language, and so is .NET. And these are various programming languages in which the site or the website or any software development is actually written. So the lines of codes that you get to see, they're all written in one of these languages. Each has a pro and a con. It all depends on what is it that you're trying to build for you to decide on which programming language should you be using. If many of you are building the website for the first time, I would suggest simply go in for a PHP based technology. That's simple, easy. You have a lot of developers who know PHP, and most importantly, it's used in WordPress, which, as we all know, is one of the good content management systems that one can use to build a website. Another important terminology that you need to understand is or language which I would say people tend to use, especially programmers tend to use or developers tend to use, is database. So they'll say, what kind of database do you want? Now, what are databases when in the sense of the web terminology? Database is where all your data is stored. Now, data could be content data, data could be forms data. You might have an inquiry form in which people fill up something, a lead form. So when somebody fills it up, it is the data that is there captured, which is like name, address, or email. They all stored in filing cabinets on the internet, and these are all folders filled with files. So that's what is called a database. And all that you do with the database is that you can then query the database to get information that you want. There are essentially two kinds of databases which are used. One is called an SQL and the other one is called NoSQL. SQL is a more popular one. It provides a lot of structure and ensuring the data is correct and validated. NoSQL is far more flexible, but yes, it requires a little bit more depth in understanding for somebody to actually apply a NoSQL type database for your website. There are some of these are some of the database sources. MongoDB is very popular. It's an open source NoSQL database. MySQL is by far the most popular one. It's an open source SQL database and it's extremely well used in WordPress website. So PHP and MySQL is a standard or the de facto knowledge platform for all developers. So all developers who typically already know PHP and they would know how to do MySQL as a database. Apart from MySQL and MongoDB, there's Oracle, which is an enterprise level SQL database. So if you're working for large enterprises, let's say like a Coke or a Pepsi or a large MNC, they would typically be using Oracle based SQL enterprise. Then there's SQL Server. These are proprietary servers which are used by Microsoft. They are Microsoft based servers. Then there's Redis and there's PostgreSQL. So these are some of the SQL database platforms that are used. But for the purpose of building a website, I would suggest is use MySQL and use PHP as a language. One important thing that you would need to understand here is a term that you will frequently hear people talking about, which is called API. What's an API? An API stands for Application Programming Interface. A good example, which all of you all can relate to. So let's say you're going to a new website and they ask you to register. Earlier, the process of registering for a new website or for a new thing was you enter your name, you enter your email ID, you enter your phone number, and then you get a login ID or a login access. But today, what most websites that you go to, they'll say, hey, hang on. Do you want to really fill up all this information? No problem. Just log in with your Facebook or log in with your Twitter or log in with your LinkedIn. Now, how does it happen? So when you can just simply press a button and say log in with the Facebook and you're instantly registered with the website. Now, what this website does is essentially they have taken an API from Facebook and use that to actually register you. So the API allows them to take the necessary relevant information of yours from Facebook. So you actually have authorized Facebook, hey, you can share to this person my name, my email ID, and maybe my city or whatever XYZ information that you want to share with the new website that you are registering yourself. Now, APIs essentially allows two websites or two platforms to talk to each other. So in this case, Facebook as a platform is essentially talking with a third-party website and sharing information. The advantage of using APIs is the fact that a lot of development work need not be done. Earlier, you would probably have to create a form in which you would put the name, email ID, and everything, and then you have to link, and then you have to put the form, create the programming for the form, and a whole lot of man-days of work would get involved. But with an API, it's a few hours of work, and you integrate the API within your website. So there are APIs today available for literally most activities, standard activities that you do, and APIs are very, very popular. And so therefore, when you're developing a website, see how you can integrate as many APIs as you can within the website, because this will actually cut down on your web development time frame. Very important aspect of developing a website is obviously making the website responsive. Now, what's a responsive website? A responsive website is a site that scales itself depending on the device through which you're accessing the website. So no matter whether you're accessing from a tablet or from a desktop or from a laptop or from a simple mobile phone, the website expands or contracts itself without distorting the look, feel, and imagery or the content of the website. Now that's what is called a responsive website. Why is it important? It's extremely important because today all of us tend to access the internet through different devices. So in the office, I might access the internet through my laptop. When I'm at home or when I'm out of office, I'll typically be accessing it through my mobile phone. So if I'm accessing and trying to look at a website, I need to make sure that my website appears absolutely as sexy as it was on a laptop. It should appear on a mobile phone and be as user friendly. So the buttons needs to be very clear on a mobile, and please remember mobile sizes are all different. I might not have a very large mobile phone. I might have a very small mobile phone with a very small screen. So your website needs to contract itself, but yet not lose its distinct identity and imagery at all. And second reason why it's very important is the fact that when you're doing SEO, if your website is not responsive, you are unlikely to rank high on the search engines, because all search engines want to give a great user experience. So if your website is not responsive, you're unlikely to deliver a great user experience to the user. So we looked at what is the average user experience. It helps in improving the SEO of the website. And thirdly, it influences users to access websites on the mobile device. And we all know that today, almost 60-70% of us, we tend to access the internet and websites from the mobile devices. The last part of developing a website is testing, collecting feedback, and bug fixing. Please remember, if you're developing any website, that there's a very little chance that there will not be a bug or a problem with the code or a problem with the website. So therefore, testing is very critical. Typically, when you use a project management tool like an Asana or a Basecamp, you can set testing parameters so that every stakeholder tests it before it hands over to the next phase. And therefore, it's very critical that once a website is done, don't immediately jump and put up your website and host your website. Do the relevant testing. The testing could really reveal that some links don't work, or some links are being redirected to a completely new link, which is not supposed to happen. So you have a lot of these small things, or maybe a form is not working effectively. You had planned to put up a thank you page. The thank you page is not displaying. Or maybe you had planned to send out an autoresponder when somebody fills up your lead form. The autoresponder is not going out effectively. It is going to the junk mail. There could be 10,000 different reasons of small errors that could have crept in during the development process. And testing actually helps you to correct this. Another very important thing when you do your testing is to check your website for the speed. There's Google has a tool which is called the Google Speed Test, which actually is very useful, and it gives you a best important thing. It gives you a dashboard to tell you how heavy or fast your website is. It is a color coded, so please make sure you have a green color code when you test it. So the website test actually tells you how fast it is, and this reason is that the two important reasons there are for doing this test. The first primary reason is, again, like I mentioned, the 60-70% of us tend to use our mobile phones, and mobile phones are not necessarily always on a good Wi-Fi connection. I might be on a 2G, I might be on a 3G, I might be in a remote area. So if my website is not loading fast on a mobile device, I am not going to wait long for it to load. I will simply stop it and go to the competitor. So therefore, the website speed is very critical. The second and equally important reason is that if your website is not fast loading, you again will not get a good ranking in the search engine optimization when you try for that. Because Google, whether it's Bing, whether it's Yahoo, all of them give a very high weightage of the speed of the website. So your speed of the website really needs to be fast. And by using the Google Speed Test, you can actually know out of a score of 100 how fast your website is loading on a desktop and how fast it's loading on a mobile device. So that's one tool that you could possibly use. So this is how the score looks on a mobile. So you get a score of 69 out of 100, which means that it needs work. And you can see it on both for mobile and desktop. And the best part is that you can actually, it gives you information of what you could correct to improve the speed score. Please remember to tell, if you outsourced your web development project, please remember to tell your web development team that you need a score which is in the green range, which is typically, if I'm not mistaken, which is about above 80%, 80 out of 100, you get into green, which means the score is good. So please make sure that this is one of the benchmark delivery outputs that you will insist upon from your web development team in case you're outsourcing. In case you're developing it yourself, please make sure that it is at least on the green side of the score. Another more in-depth testing tool that a lot of developers tend to use is the GTmetrix tool, which is your HTTPS gtmetrix.com. It helps you to analyze your site speed and make it faster. Again, like the Google speed test, it also gives you performance reports in terms of page speed score. So a B means an 84%, you are still in the green, so it's a little better. A C is not good, a D is obviously death. So you need to make sure your website loads very fast. So that's a fundamental aspect of what you need to look at, which brings us to the end of episode 6. You can find more resources, tips, guides, and courses on howtododigitalmarketing.com. That's www.howtododigitalmarketing.com. Episode 6 was, as I said, a starter in terms of the web development process. Your next episodes are going to focus on each of these aspects in greater depth. So we're going to talk about more in depth in terms of what is wireframing. We're going to talk about more in depth of color considerations that you need to use. We are going to go and talk in depth in terms of how you can use Balsamiq or various tools. And I hope that you will enjoy the session. I look forward to interacting with you once again. Thank you and bye-bye.